Another week has come and gone, and that means we have another Final Fantasy Tactics news roundup, and there's a lot to talk about today, with Square discussing bringing back the advanced games and potential sequels for Final Fantasy Tactics. Elmdore's gear can be stolen once again, we have the reveal of in-game achievements in the Ivalice Chronicles, and honestly, a whole lot more. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel. Hello everyone, if you enjoy what I do, including my ongoing coverage in the lead up to the release of Final Fantasy Tactics The Ivalice Chronicles, then a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. As I mentioned at the top, we have a whole lot that we need to talk about today, including a correction from my previous video discussing the ways that we could see Thief fixed in future versions of the game, where I made a little bit of a mistake about the Ivalice Chronicles itself. But before we get to that, this video is sponsored today, so let's talk about that sponsor really quick, shall we? This video is sponsored by Factor. If you haven't heard of it before, Factor is a prepared meals service that aims to aid you in maintaining a healthy lifestyle in the increasingly busy day-to-day lives that we all have. It provides a ton of options on a rotating weekly basis, with over 80 meals that include seafood, beef, poultry, etc., with premium options like salmon or shrimp coming at no extra cost. They've even expanded their range of options into Asian and Mediterranean styles to help match you with your preference for fine cuisine. For me, this was actually my first time trying Factor, but it definitely will not be the last, with both myself and my partner Jane being extremely impressed with our meals. So much so that we're already looking at incorporating Factor into our monthly food budget. While cooking is absolutely one of my passions, I just don't always have the time to do it. On top of doing YouTube full-time, I also have a day job, and cooking healthy, nutritious meals every night when you work 70 hours a week, that ain't easy, let me tell you. But with Factor, I can enjoy delicious meals such as this chicken and truffle rice risotto with green beans, which honestly blew me away, and I only needed a few minutes in the microwave to prepare it. I will definitely be ordering this one in particular again, and you should too. Trust me. So head to factor75.com or click the link below and use Legman FB50 to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's code Legman FB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. Thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring this video. So then, what is the news? We will start off with probably the biggest and most generally interesting piece of information that I imagine all of you are going to be quite interested in. In a recent interview with Inverse, Director Kazutoyo Maehiro of the Ivalice Chronicles was discussing the possibility for other versions of FFT, other games in the series, to be brought back, as well as the potentiality of sequels to FFT. Now, this is something we've all been discussing quite a bit. There's actually been a lot of chatter about how you should really support the Ivalice Chronicles if you want to see more FFT from Square in the future, and this is direct confirmation of that. Again, coming from the Inverse article, which I'll have linked in the description, Director Maehiro had the following to say. If the Ivalice Chronicles can do well, that's good for the fans, they can enjoy it. But at the same time, it shows the business viability of the strategy RPG genre. So that could potentially open the door for doing something with Final Fantasy Tactics Advance or A2, or maybe even sequels and new titles as well. I know this is always a topic that some people get very defensive about, like, oh, well, they're holding us hostage by telling us you must play this game and you must buy this game even if you don't like it, or we're not going to make more of them. But it's like, yeah, no kidding. That's how a business works. Like, I wish that there was just infinite money and infinite support in the world so that artists could make the art that we enjoy to consume as much as they want and as much as we want, but that's unfortunately not how it works. But it is very good to know that the team that is working on the Ivalice Chronicles is interested in seeing FFTA, TA2, and potentially sequels to FFT, and would presumably be more than happy to work on them in the future if Square Enix was willing to greenlight that. This is extremely good to hear, and hopefully we're going to see good results on the Ivalice Chronicles so that we can hear more about these projects coming back in some way in the future, whether it be ports, remasters, remakes, and then of course the potential sequels, which would be amazing. There's possibility here, and that's what I love to see. Moving on to some smaller but still very important information, some of which I think you all are going to be very excited about. It was also confirmed in another recent interview that Marquis Elmdore's gear can be stolen once again. That's right, all of you who are into stealing the Genji gear. Apparently, there was so much outcry from both Japanese fans and Western fans that there will be a day one patch introduced to all versions of the Ivalice Chronicles that will make it so that Elmdore's gear can be stolen once again. This is one of the changes that apparently Matsuno actually wanted to see brought into the game, but again, in the spirit of making it as truthful to the original Japanese release as possible, they didn't. But apparently, everyone across the world wants to be able to really knuckle down and drag out that fight to steal that Genji gear. And you know what? More power to you. Absolutely. Personally, it's never been something that I've cared too much about. I like to get through that fight and like play the game, and the Genji gear is like, it's good and it's cool to have, but like I'm not a collector, so it's not a huge deal to me. But for everyone who wanted it, it's there, and I guess it'll be a fun challenge to try and do, especially on tactical difficulty, right? Because that seems like it's going to be very scary. It's hard enough to do as it is. We'll find out how brutal it is now that there's this new hard mode difficulty. Speaking of collecting, for you completionists out there, this next piece of information is pretty interesting, and honestly, I'd be surprised if there's not a section in here about stealing Elmdore's gear. We have gotten confirmation that there is a new Academy Reports section in the menus that is basically an in-game achievements list for the Ivalice Chronicles. We haven't seen a ton about it yet, but it was shown recently on the official Final Fantasy Tactics Ivalice Chronicles Twitter account, where you will actually have a checklist of things, of achievements for Ramza to complete over the course of the game. From the screenshot we've seen, there's 50 different entries here, and I imagine there's going to be all sorts of different challenges, leveling every job to level 8, getting characters to level 99, probably doing secret fights like the deep dungeon, clearing that, getting secret gear, recruiting all the named characters, etc., etc. I can see all of those being options that would be here. And for platforms like the Switch and the Switch 2 that don't have achievements built into them, for people who are achievement hunters, this will still be a nice way to have that sort of checklist of things to do in the game. Personally, I can absolutely see myself going through it and completing every single one of these challenges, unless some of them are absolutely bonkers insane. But I would be surprised if that was really the case. There might be like one that's just truly off the wall, but that would be a fun challenge to go for. So I think a lot of people are going to be very excited to be hunting down all these different assignments to get a complete file in their game. We've also got a bunch of new footage recently, thanks to some exclusive events that other creators were invited to partake in. Not me, by the way. I will make that very clear. I do not have any inside information at this point about the game, though I certainly wish that I did. But also, Japanese outlets such as Famitsu got lengthy hands-on previews and were able to post that footage on their YouTube channels. Kind of similar to what Unicorn Overlord was doing back when we were in the pre-release cycle for that release. There hasn't been a ton of new information that we've seen here, more just good footage and it being nice to actually see how the game is playing in really kind of unedited, raw form. And it does seem like it plays very smoothly. I love all the different menu sounds. They have a lot more pizzazz to them now. I love all the different shouts, even though these are in Japanese from the Famitsu footage, but still hearing all the battle shouts, the death cries, the call-outs of actions and animations and moves, it does really seem like it's going to revitalize the game a lot. However, there are two interesting pieces of information that we were able to glean due to some of this newly released preview material. First of all, we've seen that at the end of battles, you will actually have a character displayed as the MVP for that fight, something that we've actually seen in some of the advanced games in the past. It's a very minor little feature. I would be surprised if it affects anything gameplay-wise in terms of the Ivalice Chronicles, but it will be very cool to see who your best performing unit is, and especially for newer players, kind of get a feel for what the best combinations of jobs and characters and abilities will be, which is nice. We also saw a very cute little animation here at the battle at the Zerakil Falls when Gafgarian decides to pull his trick, that you actually have a special animation when alliances change mid-battle. This is very cool. I do like it. It adds a little bit of extra drama to the affair. However, I struggle to think of any other scenarios where it would actually wind up taking place. Maybe at the end of Chapter 1 with Argath, potentially, but like, that's not even he's deployed on the field. Like, that is, he just walks in as part of the story on the opposing side. So, like, I don't know, but I like that even if this is the only time that it happens, they added this little bit of flair to show this dramatic moment. It's fun, and I really enjoy it. Flipping over to a more fan-based discussion, but which could wind up being relevant in this new release with the Ivalice Chronicles, there was an interesting discussion on Reddit a few days ago where user High Priest Funeral had a realization about the way errands have worked in the history of the game. I've certainly never seen this discussed anywhere else, and it seems like many other people hadn't either, as it was quite a lively discussion about this on the post, and I will have it linked in the description. But essentially, High Priest Funeral figured out that there may have been a bug with errands in all the past versions of Final Fantasy Tactics. For those of you who don't know, how errands work is you go to the tavern, there's a job posting, and you can select 3 different characters in a certain amount of time that they will be gone to go and complete that mission. On completion, depending on how well they do, you'll get gil, you'll get XP for those characters, and sometimes you'll find like a special treasure or a hidden location that gives you like a little lore tidbit. We talked about this a little bit previously when we were discussing the new visual novels, the re-added visual novels from the original Japanese release that are being put back into the game and how you earn them from these errands. Well, something that is never really explained, but you can kind of figure out based on text dialogue and things, is that there's almost always at least one particular job, which if you send on that mission will basically near guarantee success. However, cracking into the game's files, you see that this is not always the case. In fact, it's pretty much never the case. As High Priest Funeral says, I was looking at the errands again, and the favorite job makes no sense for the vast majority of suggestions. Then I realized it's because it's off by one. To give an example, there's an early errand called Bandits, and the Tavern Master's advice is just call one monster to send them all running. The favorite job is Time Mage. However, the next job for the next errand is Summoner. Another case, Minstrel in Distress. The suggestion is to send someone to talk to a depressed bard to get them back on their feet. So of course, you send a Thief. Right after Thief is Orator, which makes much more sense. So the idea is that there was one mission that was added that had no favored job. But because it was added to the very beginning of the list, whoever was coding the errands system, which I think actually was Director My Hero, now that I think about it, I believe he actually discussed how one of his jobs in the original version of FFT was setting up the errands system, and because it was kind of rushed and he was new, it didn't wind up being as fleshed out as they wanted it to be. So that's kind of interesting. But anyway, that they would have probably thought that the first entry should be Squire and went off of that assumption, thus miscounting every errand's favorite job by one and essentially offsetting what job was supposed to go with what mission by one, meaning that none of the descriptions and hints were ever accurate. It's a rather nasty bug that fortunately is for a pretty minor part of the game, so it's not something that is hugely problematic. And, you know, with some trial and error and some digging into the code and establishment of fan bases that can have their own wiki compilations of what works and what doesn't and everything, like, people can still get the maximum rewards. It's not like it's impossible, but it's not exactly intuitive. Now, though, since we know that the Ivalice Chronicles had to be rebuilt from the ground up, pretty much all the code recompiled, everything completely reconstructed, it's entirely possible that this has now been fixed. Especially if, I think I'm correct on this, if my hero is actually the person who did the errands system back in the day and he's now the director, it's entirely likely that he would catch the mistake and actually get things squared away so that the jobs that are being implied in the descriptions for the job offering are actually the jobs that you should be using to get the maximum reward. Combined with the re-adding of the visual novels to the game, it makes me feel like there's going to be a little bit more care that's given to the errands system this time, even if it's still a rather minor thing, and that'll be nice to have just the proper version of that system, so it makes a little bit more sense. And finally, speaking of correcting mistakes, I have to correct a mistake of my own from my recently released Fixing Every Job episode where we discussed thieves in Final Fantasy Tactics. At one point, I discussed how thieves will be a little bit easier to use in the Ivalice Chronicles because now you'll be able to see what map you're deploying onto and see what enemies are there, so you know what, if anything, you would want to steal and if you're going to want to bring a thief or someone with the steal command. However, it was then pointed out to me that with the expanded pre-release footage that we've now gotten courtesy of places like Famitsu and other creators who were able to play the game at PAX or through other events or whatever, you cannot actually see what enemy units are on the board. You can just see the terrain and the map itself, which is very cool to note because it means that all of the different like ambushes and surprises and everything that happen over the course of the game will be preserved, which I very much enjoy. But it also means that thieves are still going to be a little bit of trial and error if you don't know these fights and you want to make sure that you're stealing all the best gear. You're still going to have to go into the fight, see what enemies are there, see what gear they have, and then back out if you want to grab a thief to go and steal stuff, or just always have a thief on you, or always have someone with the steal command, which is certainly not optimal, so it's still kind of annoying. But I wanted to get that correction out there since that is something that I figured we would be able to see, and we now know that we cannot. Thank you to everyone in the comments of that video who pointed that out to me. I completely had missed it in the pre-release material because I just didn't think to look for it. Huge ups on that. And that, my friends, is the latest Final Fantasy Tactics news update. This is a pretty meaty one. There's a lot of good information out there, especially the discussion about potential sequels and the return of Tactics Advance and A2. Really happy to see a lot of this stuff, and it's just making me more and more excited for the release to finally come around in really just a few short weeks. As always, thank you to all of my channel supporters through Patreon and my YouTube members. You can see all of their names, and probably have been seeing all their names actually, scrolling by on the right-hand side of the screen. There's quite a few of you right now due to the hype of the upcoming FFT, the Ivalice Chronicles, and I do massively appreciate the help. As I've always said, having that direct aid and support from all you fine folks out there, no matter what's happening with ad rev, no matter how much traffic the channel is getting, just knowing that I can rely on that from y'all honestly takes a lot of anxiety off of my shoulders, and Lord knows I have a lot of that these days, so thank you so much. I appreciate each and every one of you. I can't wait to be able to start our campaign and have you guys start submitting your characters for Final Fantasy Tactics. I think there's going to be some very interesting things that wind up happening there. I'm curious to see how much of a challenge you guys force on me by making some really wacky characters. If you would like to get in on that action, I do have links to my YouTube members and my Patreon in the description of this video, and I will of course have some guidelines and rules and submissions requirements, etc., for how to submit a character as we get closer to the release. For now, though, that is everything for me to discuss tonight. Of course, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Thank you all so very much for watching. I always appreciate it. Come and check out my Together in Battle streams that we've been doing. There should actually be one up tonight if you're watching this on release, so come and hang out there if you would like to do that. And most importantly, I hope that you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, everyone. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.